Morning everyone. I have to apologise in advance because in my other job that I do is as a policy and engagement manager for Charity Finance Group, and that means lobbying government and officials, and today is a very busy day, so unfortunately, which I hadn't expected to be honest, so I'm going to have to skip the Q&A, but just up front, if anyone has any questions about anything I present on, thank you for my details, ring me up, email me, whatever, harass me as much as you like, I'll be happy to answer those offline. But really delighted to be here, and great to see this kind of training taking place. And the materials I'm using today are mostly from a program we have called the Small Charities Finance Program. So if you look at the website www.smallcharityfinance.org.uk, you can go on there, and we still have a few trainings left in June, which cover other issues like gift aid and how to do bank outsourcing and risk management, and how to prepare annual reports and things like that. So they might be useful for you. There's also some templates on there as well about budgets and management accounts, and you might be able to use those. I mean, as mentioned by the previous speaker, one template as much as good as the other, really. Just find the one you find that's useful, but they're all free, and they're all given by our community accountants that we work with. And again, throughout this process, I would just say that there are a lot of community accountants still out there. These are small organisations, small teams of accountants, usually non-for-profit, that give sort of discounted rates to charities and others. So if you do need advice and support, try and reach out to one of those. And again, if you go on that Small Charity Finance website, there's a map which shows the ones that we're aware of, so there might be one in your local area. And again, it's always worth just approaching them and asking what they can do for you. But anyway, I'm going to try and cover a few things: budgets, cash flow management, and cash flow forecasting management accounts. But I always felt useful just to start with this. We call it sort of the finance pyramid, and it says all those awful jargon business terms really, but it's just essentially what it's trying to do is just get people to think about why we collect this information. As Brian said, it's the so what really. So when people think about finance, they genuinely think about the bottom end of this pyramid. It's about processes and controls, making sure things are getting paid on time, making sure there's no fraud taking place and the money's going where it's supposed to go. Some people kind of raise their heads up a little bit around some of that analysis and reporting of the activities that are going on, and they're good at sharing that information. But ultimately the most important bit is that top bit, which is the supporting decision making. Ultimately, you're collecting this information, you're doing budgets, you're doing cash flow forecasting and management accounts to make effective decisions so that your charity spends its resources as effectively and efficiently as possible. So whenever you're doing any of these exercises, as Brian said, think about that so what, think about what you're going to do with that. What would you, if you got presented that information yourself, what would that tell you about how the charity needs to respond, what actions you should be taking? And again, if you can think about those things, make sure you spell it out for other members and colleagues, because I think, again, one of the challenges we have with budget making is that often people have sort of those spreadsheets and templates, and they present them to their colleagues, and they sort of go, well, I know what those numbers mean, so because I developed them, or I know what the key issues are, but they sort of leave their colleagues to guess, and sort of hopefully they'll come to the same conclusion as you do. Spell it out as much as you possibly can. And the 4 words I would use for sort of a good budget making process are preparation, information, consultation, and adaptation. So first of all, preparation. As I'll touch on in this presentation, it always takes longer than you think to construct a budget. How many of you here regularly do budgets, like project budgets or organisational budgets? A few. How long does it take you to do a budget normally? A good long time. It always begs more questions. When you start doing any budget making process, if you're doing it properly and really interrogating the issues, it always ends up asking more questions that you have to solve. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time. That preparation is important. Have a process, have a timeline of when you're going to complete it. Information, making sure you have the information at your disposal in your organisation. Where is your financial information? Where is your impact information? Do you have commitments and agreements with other funders that you need to take into account when making those budgetary decisions? Collecting all that information at the start of the process, again, is another cost and time-effective way of doing the process. Consultation, budgets. Sometimes actually what's more important than the piece of paper is the conversation that you have around the budget. It's what people end up talking about and discussing when it comes to making priorities, making decisions, and trying to think about what's the most impactful way that they can spend their resources. So make sure you build time into that consultation and talk with people as close to the front line of delivery as possible. Another problem you often see in organisations is that part of the budget making responsibility will be in one part of the organisation, maybe a manager, maybe a finance officer, somebody like that, and the delivery will be with somebody else, and they don't talk to each other. And obviously the frontline person knows some of these costs are unrealistic. There are things that are going to pop up which they can't be certain about, but they're pretty sure will create delays perhaps, or will require further expenditure. That person at the back doing that budget might not know those things. So whatever you do, it's important there's consultation and dialogue between those two sides. And finally, adaptation. These are not Moses' tablets. The whole point is change them. If new information comes up, if you have a conversation and you think, there's some risks here or there's some uncertainty here, change your budget. No one gets brownie points for having a budget that stays the same over the course of a year. The whole point is it's there as a tool for you to manage your resources effectively. So I hope those are just useful introductory remarks anyway. We'll go on to the nuts and bolts. So what is a budget? I'm sure you all know it's basically just translating a plan of action into monetary terms. What are we planning to do as an organisation? What are the resources that we need in order to carry out that activity or to function as an organisation? How much will they cost? Can we afford to deliver that? So where will the money come from? I think that's another element actually in charities which is often ignored. I think we're very good as a sector, we're very innovative, I think, and often think about how we're going to spend the money that we've got, and we're all passionate about helping those beneficiaries. The other bit though is on the income side. Where's that resource going to come from? And the amount of budgets you see in small charities where the expenditure is relatively detailed actually. They can break things down by project, by different cost bases, by different kinds of activities. But the income side just seems to be in very generic terms, fundraising or grants or things like that. Properly interrogate that, break that down. How many grants is it? What type of fundraising are you doing? Is it events fundraising? Is it direct donations from supporters? Is it subscriptions from members? That kind of thing. So where will that money come from? And finally, can we afford to deliver that plan? So again, nobody is going to penalise you if you end up coming up with a budget which has a deficit. Because the whole point is once you realise that, it's the so what question. What do you do about that? Do you have reserves? Are there other projects which are underspending that you can transfer resources to? Do you need to go back to your funders and just say, look, actually, we need more resources, we can do this effectively. So again, it's not about balancing it just to make you feel better. If you're coming up with numbers that just balance because you want to be able to go to your funder and go, oh look, we've made the budget balance, even though you don't think it's realistic, you haven't achieved anything whatsoever. So be really honest with yourself in this process. Why do a budget? And again, you're all here today, so I'm presuming you all know why you want to do a budget, why you think it's important. But again, as Brian said, a clear plan is incredibly important. It enables you to make sure that you're doing the best job for your beneficiaries. Helps you to organise resources on the basis of your priorities. It can help you with tracking performance. And for many funders as well, it's a requirement. So I don't know many funders, frankly, that would give money over without asking for some kind of business plan or a budget or some way of demonstrating how it's going to be spent. There maybe are a few of those family kitchen table foundations that might give you a few £100 or maybe £1,000, but generally speaking, the larger amounts of money, you're going to have some formal budget-making process. And as I'll come to perhaps at the end as well, I think increasingly we find when we talk to funders, they have much more confidence in charities which can demonstrate up front they have a robust budget-making and finance process. Ultimately what they're concerned about is their money having the biggest possible impact and reaching as many beneficiaries as possible. So if you can demonstrate that, you'll be in a stronger position. So there's a pecuniary incentive for you as well, I think. It's not just about your organisation. It's also about how you can sell your organisation as somebody that's a fit and proper partner to work with. When to do your budget. Again, taking longer than you think, the consultation process, which I've touched on, which is incredibly important, the drafting element of it as well. Not everybody is numerically literate. I know I struggle with Excel spreadsheets quite regularly. So, again, build in, factor in that time. If you know this is something you don't do regularly, obviously give yourself more time. Don't be a hero and try and deliver a budget as quickly as possible, because frankly, no one's going to thank you 6 or 8 months down the line when they go, these numbers don't stack up. So take your time. Negotiation, again, if it's just a simple fait accompli, when you do a budget, you say to people, well, here it is, take it or leave it, then you're not doing the budget process right. There should always be opportunity for revision and negotiation between different parts of your organisation and different activities. And finally, approval. Again, I don't know what your organisation's legal structure is like, but if you're anything like most charities, you might have quarterly trustee meetings. Are you building your budget process in to do that? How many organisations I've met where they do a great budget process, they get everything in time, but they've got a kind of deadline they're working towards, but they forget they need the trustees to approve it, and the trustee meeting's often another couple of months, and then there's the usual panic of, well, what do we do then? We've got to call an extraordinary meeting, we've got to try to get them on the telephone, on email, whatever, it just complicates the process. So think about that approval stage. What do you need to do in order to get that budget adopted? And again, this is just, good practice, I would say normal practice, just based on conversations we've had with many organisations. But for an organisational budget, you want about 3 months before the end of that financial year to start thinking about that budget and getting yourself ready. And again, that preparation time, giving yourself a good solid month to gather in that information, test those assumptions of things that happened in the past, and make sure that you've adapted yourself to changing circumstances. And again, for project budgets, obviously it's how long is a piece of string, it depends on how big the project is and how complicated it is. But generally speaking, you're looking at giving yourself at least a couple of weeks to do basically that same process I talked about, but just on a slightly smaller scale. Who should do the budget? Ideally, get those people responsible for doing the work to help as much as possible. So again, I talk about that dialogue and communication. Get those people at the front line that are delivering those services to contribute. They don't necessarily have to give you a fully worked up draft as your bit to go on, but get them to provide you that information, their insights straight away at the start of that process, and get them to inform those numbers as much as you possibly can. Get other teams involved, not just people that are traditionally involved in budgets, but it's always good to get a second pair of eyes on any document, and I think that's equally true for budgets. And it doesn't just have to be people that you consider to be financially or numerically literate. Ultimately, anybody, I think, they concentrate, can look at a budget and reveal things about it. And they might be able to reveal things about it that you didn't spot, confusions that there might be for other people who are reading it. So try and give it to somebody who perhaps isn't involved in that process as closely as you are, or maybe isn't involved in that project as closely as you are, and give them a chance to review it and give you some feedback. Again, I don't know how big people are here. How many people have a finance person dedicated in your organisation or a team or anything like that? No? You're all very small, I imagine. So, effectively, if you did have a finance team, this is the kind of bit we would go on. I think what we try and do in this area is just that usually people lump budgets in with finance, whereas actually what finance is there really for is more of an enabling role. They're giving you some skills and analysis that you can use, but really it's down to those people responsible for doing the work to try to inform their decision making. They can't do that process for them. So that's what that bit of the slide is trying to say, but I appreciate finance is a bit of a luxury having a team like that, so I'm not surprised that there's not many of you, or any of you in fact, with that function. How do you start to write? Again, I think it's relatively straightforward. I don't want to teach mothers to suck eggs, but start with a plan. What is your organisation going to do? That's the most important bit to start with, because everything flows from that. Who's responsible for different areas in the organisation? So, again, get those people involved in those activities, take responsibility for the budget making process in those areas. It's pretty common sense, but again, it doesn't always happen. And again, I must admit, sometimes actually in some organisations there's a cultural issue actually in terms of budgets. There's power associated with the budget making process, and some people don't want to let go of that. So it might be sometimes you have to prize away responsibility for various different projects from one individual, and it's always useful to have a group rather than one individual working on the budget process if you can. Help managers to work out resources they'll need. So again, just asking those questions. Again, I think areas where common pitfalls happen, for example, you're looking at the costs of delivering a certain activity to your project. People usually pick up things like staff costs or materials or things like that, and travel expenses. What about supervision? What about pension costs? What about the upkeep and rent of the building, or whatever the space they're occupying that building? There's other support costs that go around an individual. Make sure that people are thinking about those when they're drafting this budget. And how many organisations we've spoken to where they think they've got their project, different activities sorted out, they forget about their support costs and end up creating difficulties for themselves financially at the end of the year when they realise they haven't budgeted for those costs. So make sure you're giving those tools. If you can break down for different teams or different people or for two organisational activities what those costs should be and centralise that, that would be great. But if, again, you don't have the capacity to do that, just get people to think about it. So at least they can give you some information as to what they think those support costs might look like. And again, asking people to think about where their money's going to come from. Again, if you don't have a finance team, most of you don't have fundraisers either, so you're probably doing all those activities at once. But again, thinking in your own mind or in those who are responsible for it, where is that cash going to come from? And again, in detail, not just it's going to come from fundraising. What kind of fundraising? Does that have costs? If you're going to do events, for example, to raise money, those have cost implications. So are you considering those cost implications? Are you adapting yourself to that? Income. I'm not sure how you get your income as organisations. Do you get grants generally, or are you fundraising? Are they pretty stable, those grants? No? No? A bit of volatility. Just very quickly then, it's a similar process to how you predict expenditure. Think about your current experience, how successfully you fundraise, if you fundraise at all, how regular those grants coming in, how certain those grants will be. Thinking about doing some research, look at other organisations in a similar area to yours, how do they raise their money? And again, the great thing about the charity sector is, if you are registered charities, you can go online to Charity Commission, you can look at everyone's annual reports, you can see how they've done the work they've done, whether there's a particular funding sources or streams that they've used, and maybe you can use similar streams or resources in your local area. So do that market research. It's always tricky to do, isn't it? There's no right or wrong answer to when income becomes certain, or there isn't a right answer in the sense of as soon as you get that final confirmation letter and it goes in the bank account, that's absolutely certain. But until that point, it's always a judgment call. And you've got to make a decision as an organisation as to how much risk you want to take. If you are in a fairly strong financial position and you can, if an income source doesn't quite pan out for you, maybe you can be a bit more, okay, if it's 70% likely it's going to come in, we'll stick it in the budget. If not, we will keep it out. The less financially secure you are, the more conservative you want to be, the more you want to be looking towards 90 to 100% certainty, because obviously the risks are much higher. If that doesn't come in, you're going to be in serious financial difficulty. So again, thinking about that risk management. And again, be cautious. Don't be a hero. Don't try to be over optimistic. Try and be as rigorous as you possibly can. In the interest of time, I'm sure all these slides will be made available to people, so you can always go through the rest of it. So don't worry about having to scribble down copious amounts of notes unless you want to. But just briefly on presentation, because I think that's quite important. Pull out the headlines. Again, don't just leave people to guess what the headlines of that is. If it is that there's a huge income target, there is a significant income target that you need to raise, pull that out. Make it clear, bold it. Put a little arrow in a text box going out, going, by the way, this is a significant increase in our income, 10, 15% increase. Or on an expenditure side, look, there's a significant new cost here, or we actually predict that our support costs are going to go up because our rent's going to go up, and we need to budget for that. Pull those headlines out for people. Don't just leave it in the numbers, because some people, I think I'm right in saying, and I'll come on to this now actually, I think I'm right in saying I went to a presentation where people said that 80% of the public are visual learners rather than numerical learners, so they find graphics and information much easier to digest that way than just giving them the numbers. So you've got to do as much as you possibly can to pull that information out for them. And again, graphics are a great way of doing it, and I'll touch on just a couple of examples. Don't give any surprises. It's not about getting your budget through in a pristine way, and sneaking things in there. You want people to be open and honest and have a proper conversation, because otherwise, if it turns out to have problems later, it's you will be blamed for why these issues weren't discussed at the time. So try and be as transparent as possible. And ask what you want. When you present a budget to people, do always, and I know it might sound a bit glib, but just ask people, how was that for you? Was this useful information? what particularly struck you in this budget? You know, what did it make you think about? Because that'll help you to do the next round, and it'll make you, you can constantly iterate and change and become more effective. Just in terms of some examples, and these are really simple to do, again on Excel, it pretty much does it for you, so you don't have to worry too much. But again, just taking that sort of black and white, boring number bit in the top right-hand side, and then just giving people a couple of bar graphs. And you can see already, it takes that numerical information, and it makes very clear that, look, their income and expenditure forecast, so their budget and forecast income and expenditure, those sort of on a downward trend, and that relieves, gives its own priorities and issues that it needs to be resolved with. Breaking things down again, this is another simple thing you can do in Excel on the bar chart. You can put actually detail into it, so you can break things down a little bit more clearly for people. So on the income side, it's not just one big bar graph of income. You can see particular bits, so when you compare that budget with your forecast going forward, it starts to say, look, fees and charges, there's a bit of a squeeze there already. Do we think about that? It just helps people to get that a bit more, get easier. And again, a similar process here. So, play around with these things. And there's no right or wrong answer. Some people like pie charts, some people like bar graphs, some people like line graphs. Keep experimenting. Keep asking people, what do you find useful? What is it too much information, too little? And adapt accordingly. I think it's probably about all I've got time for. As I say, I've got a bit more at the end about management accounts, which and support costs, which you might find useful. But those are building slides. I'm really sorry again that I can't stay for your Q&A, but again, if you do have any queries, our email address is policy@cfg.org.uk, so you can go and ask any questions there. www.smallchatfinance.org.uk, that's got lots of resources on there for free. There's got some guides on there as well, and you can use those and download them and come to the trainings that you might find useful in other areas. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to present to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.